You ever walk away from a conversation thinking, why did I say that? Yeah, me too. That's where emotional intelligence comes in. It's not about being perfect. So, how do we increase it? Step one, pause before you react. Most people listen just to answer. But if you pause, even for 2 seconds, you give your brain space. That space turns reaction into response. That's emotional intelligence at work. Step two, name what you feel. Angry, disappointed, excited. When you put a label on it, it loses some power over you. It's like turning on the lights in a dark room. You see what's actually there. Step three, read the room. Look at faces. Listen to tone. Pay attention to body language. Because people will tell you everything you need to know without saying a word. Step four, get curious, not furious. When someone pushes your buttons, ask yourself, why do they see it that way? That question flips the script. You go from defensive to understanding. And understanding builds trust. Final step, practice it daily. Emotional intelligence isn't a book you read once. It's a muscle. You build it in conversations, in conflicts, in moments where you want to roll your eyes, but choose patience instead. So here's the bottom line. Emotional intelligence isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself so you can connect better with them. Pause. Name it. Read the room. Get curious. Repeat. Do that, and you'll notice your relationships, your work, your peace of mind get a whole lot stronger. Most of the time, when something happens that triggers us, our first instinct is to fire back. Someone cuts us off in traffic. A coworker makes a comment we don't like. A friend forgets to call us back. That little spark of irritation lights up, and before we even realize it, words are flying out of our mouths or our faces showing exactly how we feel. That's a reaction. It's quick, it's raw, and honestly, it usually doesn't help. Here's the problem with reacting too fast. Once those words are out, you can't take them back. The tone, the sharpness, and the eye roll, it's already out there. And people remember how you make them feel. They may forget the exact words, but the sting of your reaction will stick. That's why pausing is such a powerful tool. Pausing doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you don't know what to say. It means you're smart enough to give yourself a gap between what just happened and how you choose to respond. Think of it like a filter. That little pause is the difference between saying something that escalates the situation or saying something that keeps the conversation moving in the right direction. Let's make it practical. Imagine your boss sends an email criticizing your work. Your first reaction is to get defensive. Maybe your fingers are already on the keyboard, typing out a reply that proves them wrong. If you hit send in that moment, you're reacting. Now imagine you stop, take a breath, maybe even walk away from the screen for a minute. That pause changes everything. Instead of firing back, you give yourself space to cool down and think, what's the best way to handle this? What outcome do I actually want? Now, when you reply, you sound professional instead of combative. Same situation, completely different result because you paused. Another example, someone makes a rude comment in a meeting. The reaction is to snap back, embarrass them, or shut them down. But if you pause, even just for a beat, you can choose a response that shows composure. Maybe you redirect the conversation. Maybe you ask a calm question that exposes their rudeness without you having to raise your voice. That pause gives you the upper hand. Here's what's really happening in the pause. Your body is calming down. When you're triggered, your brain floods with emotion. The pause lets that wave settle just enough for the logical part of your brain to come back online. It's not about ignoring your feelings. It's about giving those feelings a moment to settle before they drive the car. And the pause doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's just 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, you can take a breath. You can unclench your jaw. You can remind yourself, I don't have to match their energy. Those small choices add up. Think about the last argument you had with someone close to you. Chances are, what made it worse wasn't the original problem. It was how both of you reacted to each other's reactions. It turned into a chain reaction. A pause breaks that chain. It stops the cycle before it spins out of control. Pausing is a skill. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. At first, you'll catch yourself after the reaction and think, I should have paused. That's okay. Over time, you'll start noticing the moment before you react. You'll feel that urge to snap back or prove your point, and instead, you'll take that breath. That's progress. The beauty of the pause is that nobody even knows you're doing it. From the outside, it just looks like composure. Inside, you're taking control of your emotions and steering them where you want them to go. And the people around you, they'll notice. They'll see that you handle yourself differently. They'll trust you more because you're not unpredictable. Most of us go through the day carrying emotions without ever really stopping to name them. We say things like, I'm fine, or I'm stressed, when really there's a whole storm happening inside that doesn't have just one label. Maybe it's disappointment, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's frustration because something didn't go the way you pictured. When we don't name what we feel and those emotions pile up, get blurry, and eventually spill out in ways we don't want. Naming your feelings is like turning on the light in a messy room. You can finally see what's actually there. When you can name your emotion, you gain control over it. It's no longer this big, vague cloud hanging over your head. It becomes specific, and specific is easier to handle. Saying, I'm angry, is different than saying, I'm irritated because my effort wasn't acknowledged. Those two things might look the same on the outside, but they need different responses. One makes you want to lash out. The other makes you realize you value recognition, and that's the root of the emotion. That clarity only comes when you stop and name it. Here's the trick: emotions are signals. They're not the enemy. They're like the warning lights on a dashboard. If the check engine light comes on in your car, you don't get mad at the light. You check what's going on under the hood. Emotions work the same way. When you feel tension in your chest, or your stomach drops, or you catch yourself snapping at people, you don't have to ignore it. You can name it. I'm anxious. I'm hurt. I feel left out. Once you put words to it, you can deal with the actual problem instead of fighting the symptom. Think about kids. When a child is upset, sometimes all they need is for an adult to help them put words to the feeling. You're sad because your toy broke. The moment it's named, they calm down. Why? Because being understood, even by themselves, takes away some of the chaos. Adults aren't any different. We just think we are. The truth is, most adults walk around with unnamed emotions all day, letting those emotions leak into conversations, decisions, and reactions without realizing it. Another benefit of naming what you feel is that it helps you communicate better with others. Imagine telling your partner, "You're making me mad." That statement almost always puts them on the defensive. Now compare that to, "I feel hurt because I don't feel listened to." Totally different energy. The first sparks a fight, the second opens a conversation. Same situation, but naming the feeling changes the outcome. There's also a physical release that comes with naming emotions. Neuroscientists call it affect labeling. When you say out loud, "I feel anxious," your brain activity in the emotional center actually decreases. In other words, the simple act of naming your feeling calms your nervous system. It's like your body goes, okay, we've identified the threat. We can relax a little. That's why putting your feelings into words isn't just a psychological trick. It's a biological tool. And here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes you think you're feeling one thing, but when you pause and dig deeper, it's actually something else. You might say, I'm angry. But when you look closer, you realize it's sadness. You might say, I'm stressed, but it's really fear of failing. That's why naming isn't always instant. Sometimes it takes reflection. Sometimes you try on a few words until one fits. But once it clicks, you'll know because your body relaxes and your mind says, yes, that's it. This is also how you build empathy. When you're practiced at naming your own emotions, you get better at recognizing them in other people. You can spot when someone is defensive, not because they're mean, but because they're insecure. You can see when someone is withdrawn, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed. That skill, reading emotions accurately, starts with practicing on yourself first. So when you feel a rush of emotion, don't shove it down. Stop. Ask yourself, what's the word for this? Am I angry or am I embarrassed? Am I annoyed or am I disappointed? Don't settle for the easy label. Get specific, because the more specific you are, the easier it is to deal with what's really going on underneath. Most people think communication is all about the words that come out of your mouth. But the truth is, the majority of communication has nothing to do with words. It's tone, posture, expression, timing. Reading the room means paying attention to all of those unspoken signals that tell you how your words are landing and what the atmosphere really is. If you ignore them, you miss half the conversation. If you notice them, you give yourself an advantage in how you connect with people. Reading the room starts with observation. Walk into a meeting and before you talk, look around. Are people leaning forward, engaged, making eye contact? Or are they checking their phones, arms crossed, eyes glazed over? That tells you if they're open to hearing what you have to say or if you need to adjust your approach. The same goes in personal conversations. If your friend is quieter than usual, if their shoulders are slouched, if their smile doesn't reach their eyes, that's information. They may not say, "I'm upset," but their body already did. A lot of times we push forward with our own agenda without noticing these signals. You've probably been in a situation where someone keeps talking and talking without realizing the audience has already checked out. They're too busy thinking about what they want to say to notice the energy in the room. That's what happens when you don't read the room. The words might be fine, but the timing is wrong, and timing matters just as much as content. Reading the room also means listening to tone. Words can say one thing, but tone can completely change the meaning. If someone says, "I'm fine," through clenched teeth, you know they're not fine. If someone says, "That's great," in a flat voice, you know they don't mean it. Paying attention to tone keeps you from taking words at surface level and lets you understand the real message underneath. And don't forget silence. Silence is communication too. A pause after you speak can mean people are processing. It can mean they're unsure. It can mean they disagree but don't want to say it. If you read the room, you'll notice whether that silence feels thoughtful or tense. If you miss it, you might bulldoze right over it and lose the chance to address what's really happening. Another layer to this is group dynamics. In a group, not everyone talks equally. Sometimes the loudest voice dominates, but the real decision makers are quiet, sitting back observing. If you only focus on who's speaking the most, you miss the influence of the ones who say less. Reading the room means noticing where the eyes go, who people defer to, who shifts when a certain person speaks. That gives you insight into the unspoken hierarchy. It's also about empathy. When you read the room, you're putting yourself in other people's shoes. You're asking, how are they feeling right now? What's the emotional temperature? If the energy is tense, cracking a joke might not land. If the energy is light, being overly serious might feel out of place. You adjust not by being fake, but by being aware. That awareness makes people feel understood because they see that you're responding to them, not just talking at them. Here's a practical way to practice. Next time you're in a conversation, pick one thing to notice: eye contact, body language, or tone. Just focus on that. You'll be surprised how much more you pick up when you're intentional. Over time, you'll train yourself to scan the whole room without even thinking about it. And here's the key: reading the room is not about manipulation. It's about connection. It's about noticing the signals people are already giving you and respecting them enough to respond appropriately. When you walk into any setting and you take the time to observe, to listen, to sense the mood before jumping in, you communicate something powerful without saying a word. When someone pushes your buttons, the easiest thing in the world is to get angry. That's the instinct. Someone cuts in line, interrupts you in a meeting, or makes a snide remark, and your body reacts before your brain has time to catch up. Your heart rate spikes, your jaw tightens, and you want to fire back. That's the furious part. But what if instead of going straight to fury, you shifted into curiosity? What if your first thought wasn't, "How dare they?" but "I wonder why they did that"? That simple shift changes the entire interaction. Curiosity creates space. Anger closes it. When you're furious, the walls go up. You're focused on defending yourself, proving a point, or making the other person feel what you feel. When you're curious, the walls come down just enough to explore the situation. You start asking questions instead of throwing accusations. Instead of, "Why are you being so rude?" you try, "What's going on for you today?" One shuts the door, the other cracks it open. Think about the last argument you had. Chances are you were both reacting, both trying to be heard, and neither of you is actually listening. Now imagine if one person had gotten curious. If instead of yelling, they asked, "Can you tell me what you meant by that?" The tone would have shifted. Curiosity doesn't mean you agree, and it doesn't mean you let people off the hook. It means you're more interested in understanding than escalating. Here's the thing: people's behavior always has a backstory. You may not see it, but it's there. The coworker who snapped at you might be overwhelmed with deadlines. The driver who cut you off might be racing to the hospital. The friend who canceled plans might be struggling with something they haven't shared. When you get furious, you write your own story about why they acted that way, and usually it's the worst possible version. When you get curious, you leave room for another story, one that might make more sense. Curiosity also gives you control. Anger feels powerful in the moment, but it usually leaves you feeling drained or guilty afterward. Curiosity feels calmer. It slows things down. You can still set boundaries. You can still speak firmly, but you're doing it from a place of choice instead of reaction. That's real control, choosing your response instead of letting someone else's behavior dictate it. It also builds stronger relationships. When someone expects you to lash out and instead you ask a thoughtful question, it surprises them. It disarms the tension. They feel heard instead of attacked. And that opens the door for better communication. Over time, people learn that you're someone who doesn't jump to conclusions, and that builds trust. Of course, this isn't easy. Curiosity takes practice, especially in heated moments. Your brain will want to go straight to fury, and you'll have to catch it. One trick is to pause and ask yourself, what else could be true here? That question interrupts the cycle. Another is to literally ask the other person something, even if it's small. Can you explain that? Or what do you mean by that? Those questions buy you time, and they shift the energy away from attack mode. It's worth noticing that curiosity doesn't mean excusing bad behavior. If someone crosses a line, you can acknowledge it and hold them accountable. But you'll do it more effectively if you understand what's driving them instead of just reacting to the surface. Curiosity helps you see the root, not just the symptom. And sometimes curiosity isn't about the other person at all. It's about you. Instead of getting furious at yourself for messing up, you can get curious about why it happened. What was I feeling in that moment? What triggered me? What can I learn from this? That mindset turns mistakes into lessons instead of shame. Getting curious is about keeping your dignity in the moments where it's easiest to lose it. It's about choosing to explore instead of explode. It's about shifting the question from, how could they, to, I wonder why. That little pivot makes a huge difference in how you handle conflict, how you connect with people, and how you carry yourself when emotions are high.